Hello, and thanks so much for joining me for an episode of the Friday Reporter podcast. Today's guest is Bruce Mehlman, who is a partner at Mehlman Consulting. His career has spanned really all across, from government to Silicon Valley, you name it. Bruce has done some really remarkable things. He today writes a pretty great weekly roundup. His Substack is called The Age of Disruption. And I'm going to let him tell us a little bit more about that, about how the intersection of the three bits of his career have really sort of intersected and provides a great point of view. I think you're really going to like this episode. Let's get into it. You've always been someone that everyone that I know seeks you out for your counsel as it relates to intersection between technology, policy, politics, all of that. For a long time, you did do a quarterly deck. Now you've turned it into this weekly newsletter. You call it the Age of Disruption. Talk to me a little bit about your process and what got you from developing what you did into something that's a weekly product.
Microsoft flagged me as a spammer. In the old days, I would do my big quarterly giant slide decks, 30 or 40 slides, sort of Mary Meeker meets Karl Rove. Mm-hmm. And I loved doing them. They were big thinks and they took a ton of time, but, really good feedback, and people would email me to join the list, and they were, there was nowhere to brag about it. They weren't followers like on Twitter, but really famous people were emailing me, and that made me feel good about, okay, I'm doing something that is, that people who I respect seem to think is valuable. But the way I would distribute it is I had this insane spreadsheet with all of these columns: first name, last name, email, where do you work? How do I wanted to sort people at the same company together. I wanted to have VIPs ranked differently because I would send an email to the CEO one-to-one. Unbelievably inefficient. The list got up to about 8,000 people.
Wow.
But I was thereby, I'm like, all right, most of these I'm batching. So I would email myself and put 40 people at a time in BCC. So, anytime I was now sending out an invitation for an event or a quarterly deck, I'm spending 2 hours just jamming out emails. And then one day I get, block the email inbox. It's clear everything's getting jammed. And when I called our firm's IT people, they said, well, Microsoft concludes that anybody who sends that many BCC identical emails out in that short a period of time is sort of definitionally a spammer. And they're just not going to take my word for it that everybody had opted in. So that forced me to switch to platforms. I go to Substack, which I like receiving and I like reading, and it's very easy to work on Substack. The problem with Substack, though, is you got to feed the beast more than once a quarter. And you feel like you have no followers and it's naked out there when it's just 7, even though the hits on my firm's website when I would do a quarterly deck in the pandemic were getting up to 100,000.
Wow.
The number of actual emails that it would start with was really small. And so I'm on Substack and I find I'll just start maybe throwing out kind of the cutting room floor, things that I saw that looked interesting for the week. And a couple of weeks in, I did one that was thematic and just kind of got that dopamine, like, oh, wow, a lot of people found this cool and they shared it, and you go from the 8,000 names you start with to 8,300. And you're like, oh, that was good. I'd like more of that, please. And suddenly you're doing a weekly. The biggest bummer, Lisa, and I'm sorry I've kind of filibustered here, but the quarterlies took a ton of time, but now the weekly Substack that comes out Sunday morning, and I should note, is free, but that takes somewhere between 3 and 8 hours, and it's fully starved the amount of lifetime since I'm still sleeping and I'm still talking to Amy and, and trying to be a dad and occasionally working out and doing client work. I just ran out of time to do the big stuff. So now it's a weekly hit.
But the weekly hit, people are referencing it all the time. I mean, I watched a Sunday show yesterday and it looked like somebody picked it up, a name we know. That's right. Yeah.
I was psyched. Yeah.
Because people are really paying it. It's cutting through. I mean, you talked about yesterday, you're talking about the economy. You're talking about sort of the perception of the economy, how two different, sides of the economy are perceiving the way things are going. Every single week you provide that kind of content. And I can tell there's a lot of work that goes into it. But also too, I have to believe that reporters are calling you because of this analysis. Like, people are seeking you out for this kind of work that you're doing. Talk to me a little bit about what's a day in the life for Bruce Mehlman. You have a little bit of everything going on right now.
Well, you wake up and the dog demands that you take her out, and you have your coffee, and then you got to take her out again, and then you go to work. It, uh, I love what I do. I'm a nerd. I like history. I like politics and policy. It's really easy for all of us to kind of over rotate on the degree to which it's so nasty and scary and intense. And it is nasty and scary and intense. But if you read history, if you kind of remove yourself and instead of day to day what outrage in the news has you upset, if you try to be a little bit more historical or clinical about it, we're living through an extraordinary time in American history, not unprecedented, just we go through periods like this. The 70s to the 60s, 70s, and 80s were like this, or into the 80s. The Gilded Age was like this. The Great Depression, New Deal, World War II was like this, when you have sort of two things happening. You have all of the policies and the institutions that govern our lives were things that were built in a prior era. In this case, 20th century solutions to 20th century problems. But at some point, they're no longer well designed for the new era you're in. So you saw sort of the New Deal answers were no longer fit for the malaise, sclerotic economy, 1970s America, and you needed the Reagan Revolution. The agrarian rules of the late 1800s weren't well designed for the Industrial Revolution. You had, therefore, the Gilded Age followed by a progressive era. We're living through, I think, another mismatch. We're all in these 20th century institutions and policies, and people in the real world are facing 21st century challenges and saying, these guys don't get it. They're not solving my problems. It looks like the trade deals are good for people in Davos, but not good for me. That's why the factory moved to China. Or, they're circling the wagons and protecting each other, and I'm being left out in the cold. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to vote for change. That is a much broader answer than what you asked, sort of the day in the life. But what I do, I spend a lot of time trying to connect the moment in history and the big, broad macro trends that are trying to understand what's driving everything. And then how do you connect them to all of the clients who hire our bipartisan firm? And sometimes it's as simple as we need allies on this legislation. It affects these districts. That's great. But we got a lot of clients who are doing AI. And the answer is there aren't regulations that were designed for AI. Maybe there should be, maybe there shouldn't be. But if the feds don't do anything, the states are going to, and the international folks are going to do it. And that may or may not be optimal for the United States. So some of this is trying to think about, these new questions and thinking about the precedent of what worked in the past and what would the modern variants of that be, and how might that inform what we advise clients and how we help clients go about solving their challenges so they can hire more people and innovate faster.
You've been at this for some time, specifically in the tech space. I mean, obviously, now you service clients all across the spectrum. But I'm curious about your point of view, Bruce. When you and I first met, you were at the Department of Commerce, you were overseeing tech policy there, and have really focused quite a bit on that. The whole world has changed from the time that you and I were working together to now, 20 years. Technology really had a halo effect. And now it feels as if that has shifted in some way. Will you talk to me a little bit about that evolution from the time you were at the Commerce Department, perhaps till today, in your point of view?
Well, sure. The Internet Bubble 1.0, of course, was initially it grew without a predecessor internet bubble. So, it was awesome and we all loved being in those stocks until they blew up. Then we all thought, man, the idea of buying dog food online, that's stupid. That'll never work. And it turned out, it was the right idea at the wrong time. But the internet, and for that matter, the United States in the late 90s were seen as all or net positive answers. We've got a lot of good solutions to a lot of problems. Suddenly new voices got channels to be heard. There was privacy on the internet. Nobody knew you were a dog. There's a lot of hope. A couple of things. First, the internet and technology became so much more ubiquitous. They define every aspect of modern life. I would argue overwhelmingly to the better, but it went from less impact on our lives and a lot of promise to overwhelming impact on our lives and a mixed picture, because everything has is a mixed bag. The great news of everybody, as you see this in Minneapolis now, everybody can be a witness. Everybody can be a publisher. Everybody can be an activist. The flip side is you also have lots of disinformation and misinformation and a false sense of reality causing teens to be depressed and have a lot of FOMO. When I look at across technology, the idea, that I no longer necessarily need to wait in Starbucks. I can, at the same red light that's the right distance away every time, hit, same order as last time. So it's a red lightable 45, 30-second app. And I just show up and I pick it up. The good news is, my God, that's efficient. The bad news is I used to know the baristas. They were kind of friendly with them. Now it's just you pick up your thing and you leave. And which is better? Well, they both have a lot to be said for them. And so I'm finding now that there is the reality of it all, now that it's so much more ubiquitous, its upsides are magnified and the downsides, the challenge that can be the social media life are also magnified.
And I think that to me also comes back to the part where you talked earlier about the fact that the time frame from the 20th to the 21st century, the adjustment, the changes, all of those things is really what we're feeling geopolitically, right? Is that the world is shifting at a time faster than perhaps we can even catch up. That's at least sort of the perspective that I get from what you said earlier. Would you say that's true?
Oh, very much. It is people feel like they can't keep up, but there's a really good book by an author named Philip Blom, Blom, called The Vertigo Years. And it talks about the world in the late 1800s, but really 1900s, so just pre-World War I. And just like now, back then in the Gilded Age into the Progressive Era, how we work, live, play, learn, parent, fight wars, overwhelmingly transformed by technology. Today, we know it's the internet, it's autonomy, it's drones, it's AI, but back then it was electricity. It was, new industrial manufacturing. It was automobiles. It was airplanes. It was telegraphy and then telephony and extraordinary changes. And people back then were reporting nervous disorders. They were going to the hospital and, people couldn't keep up and it was so overwhelming and technology's never been this extraordinary. And for them, it was like, a car that went 50 miles an hour. But so many of the mismatch between what humans perceived normal should be and what the new realities were led to so much of the same disruption and social dislocation and economic uncertainty that we're facing today. It reminds me that nothing is unprecedented if you've read history, even though there are ways in which new things are new and different. But humans since fire and the wheel have been running into new technologies, transforming things, and we think we won't be able to manage or keep up. I'm pretty confident when, if you and I do one of these again in 20 or 25 years, Lisa, it's
God willing.
yeah, but there'll be all these amazing things and we'll be worried about different new things, but all these amazing things that right now we're figuring out and we sort of take for granted. And, and then all of a sudden, the ways in which the home assistants, which have become partly robots and much more thoughtful, you'll just say what you want and it'll do so many of the things and you won't say, well, this sucks. And it won't have it won't have, drained humanity out of being human. We'll just be spending our time doing other different cool things.
I love that. I love that so much because I say that often, even to my kids, because they're 19 and 20 or 18 and 20. It's about history. Remind yourself of those moments. And I feel like whenever we remind ourselves of exactly those pivot points and those change points over the course of all history, it reminds us that we have been here before, not necessarily in the same place, but we have seen change. We have seen that adjustment. I'm curious though, you advise quite a bit on political risk. And so, we talk about corporations that are building these tremendous technologies and these tremendous advancements. There is also quite a bit of advisement that you have to do every day about that. What kinds of counsel do you offer today as it relates to the way that corporations are addressing Washington, D.C. and state capitals?
Yeah, lobbying firms at our heart do three things. We help usually businesses, but we help organizations, sometimes NGOs, understand what's going on, separate headlines from reality,
Mm.
anticipate what's likely to happen next, and engage. Who are the policymakers, the stakeholders who can actually change the direction of things to help your organization have fewer headwinds and more tailwinds? Um, a vast amount of success in that is trying to understand risk. And it could be the risk of, are we going to go to war? Are all of our chips coming from Taiwan? Or, if it's Apple, if all of our phones are made in mainland China, like that's a big geopolitical risk. So what's happening with Venezuela? What do we think is going to happen with Iran? Trying to understand um, global policy, what the government leaders of all the countries are doing as they relate to each other is a huge amount of it. A lot of that is economic risk. Supply chains are being tested by tariffs. They're being tested by climate. They're being tested by technology. I think in that 20-year time that you and I are going to do this next, there's going to be a whole lot of 3D printers that make things. And so things that right now are made because it's a country with cheap labor, or maybe a country that's near supply chains, increasingly you're going to go to what is today a Kinko's and just say, all right, here is the equivalent of a flash drive, and probably just your phone. Here are a design for Air Mehlman shoes that I came up with, because Nike is just a design company now. And I did, with their tools, I designed shoes that are perfectly fit for my feet, and how I walk. And I'm going to have them printed, and and they'll be out in 20 minutes. And that's, boom, that's done. I tend to, that's a long digression from, there's technology risk too. And so, you take all of those things, and then you throw in the decade of the 2010s, the birth of social media brought a lot of brands suddenly into contact with activists in a way they hadn't necessarily been. Where all of a sudden, if I'm an activist in the old days, I would do a march and I would try to get headlines and I would try to get somebody to introduce a piece of legislation. That's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Now I could just do an online boycott and go slam dunk on a brand and have that company change its behavior, not because of a law, but because of the perceived reputational risk. And you saw that in a little bit pre-Trump. You saw the left beginning to do it. Then in Trump 1.0, the left really kind of kicked into gear doing that. Then in Biden, you saw the right and Robbie Starbuck and people like that start with naming and shaming and aggressive online campaigns. And so businesses have hoped in Trump 2.0 they can stick to being businesses. But your brand is super visible, and that it makes it exposed to not only supply chain risks, not only geopolitical risks, but also the kind of the culture war risk of getting dragged into one side or another of a 50-50 issue.
You run a lot of issue campaigns. And certainly that's probably a big piece of the way you counsel. Like, where are there deficiencies? What are people missing? What are they not including, or what needs to be included in an issue campaign? Will you give me some example or something that stands out to you as something perhaps people aren't thinking about already as they start to formulate these programs, or perhaps if there's something that you've noticed recently that you think is working well?
Well, I do. I wrote a piece back in the day of the longer reports called "Woke Capitalism and Its Discontents." And
Hmm.
as I always try to do, I try to be really balanced. I don't want to be ideological. My firm is half Republican, half Democrat. And so some would argue the title is a little incendiary. But the point is, there are a lot of people in businesses who think we should never speak out about anything, anywhere, anytime that's not simply about the business itself.
Mm.
And there are others who feel like, we have a voice and we should use it, and we have values, and our stakeholders, especially our young Gen Zers and millennials, expect we're going to, be out there, and both are wrong. The
Mm.
people who think you never have to talk about anything misappreciate the degree to which sometimes it lands at your doorstep, and silence is taking a position or taking a point of view. And there's some things you don't want to be silent about. It's not who you are, and it's not right. There are other people, though, the people who think you need to basically have a new sort of secretary of state at your company whose job is to opine on everything that's happening in the news, that's an insanely horrible policy. And everybody who tried to do it found that, they were never saying enough or doing enough for people. And then they were proving themselves to be super hypocritical. It feels like businesses are thought they had gotten a little bit better at trying to find the right balance between when they how and when to engage. To me, the thing I advise a lot of folks, and the thing too many people miss, what you do matters more than what you say. So if you have young people who are maybe more progressive and who have values, okay, don't feel like you need to be their spokesperson in Twitter or on Blue Sky or wherever the hell you're going to do it on TV, but rather, what do you care about? You care about climate? Okay, let's look at our supply chain. How do we make it a more sustainable supply chain? And when they come and they say, you've got to speak out. Somebody is, Greta Thunberg, somebody said something mean to Greta Thunberg. The answer that I would say is, we're not going to get into who's saying what to whom. You care about the environment, so do we. Here's how we've made our supply chain more sustainable. Here are the community organizations that we're writing big checks to. Here are this, you don't like that affirmative action went away. Here are the things that we're doing to make sure that, people who are first generation get a chance to go to college. There's so many, they used to call it CSR, but so many actions you can take to run an organization that don't need to put you on team red or team blue, and that don't need to put you into the kind of the political eye of the storm. And I would argue actually matter more. If all you do is talk and you never actually do any action, I don't care that you've, have 100% approval rating from the American Conservative Union or have 100% approval rating from the ACLU. You're just a bunch of hot air. I want to see what you do. That I think people are starting to realize. And then you can think, well, politically, we're going to get in trouble for doing this. So let's preempt it with some action. And then let's make sure we're talking to and listening to our stakeholders who are going to care about these sort of things. And then they're going to know that they're with an employer who has heart because of the things that we're doing and because of the conversations we're having with them. But we're going to stay the hell out of the headlines because that does not help the business, which doesn't help their jobs, which therefore doesn't help the community.
That's such a great thought. And I love that too, because it's something that I counsel often to clients about consistency, like not just performative politics or not politics as red or blue, but more about your political issues, whether it's climate or technology or education, you name it. But consistently knowing what your product is, knowing what your brand is, and consistently talking about it rather than where you perform on Blue Sky, Twitter, TikTok, you name it. Because I love that. Like, I think that that's why people are more drawn to you because they know exactly where you stand from a corporate point of view as CEO or spokesperson or even member of Congress or elected person. Being consistent about where you are, knowing truly what it is you stand for, I think really is defining and important.
And separating the performative from the meaningful.
That's right.
I remember one of my dear friends when I graduated law school, he and I became roommates. And I remember I got a call one day and it's like some kid and is Mr. Andrew there? My buddy was a guy named Andy Keys. He's a great lawyer in DC. And I'm like, Mr. Andrew, Andy, he's not here. And it was a family thanking him for delivering a Christmas tree, which he had done. He didn't tell anybody. That's what he does. Maybe he still does it. But that's what he did every Christmas. He would just buy a couple of trees and take them to families that needed trees and just leave them. And I remember thinking that's so much more powerful than somebody trying to get credit. I think the same thing is true for businesses. Do the right thing. Don't worry about whether it's adequately heralded. It's the same within your career. Put your head down, grind, put out high quality work. Don't worry about whether you feel like you're getting all of the credit that you think you deserve all of the time. You've got a Substack and you've got a podcast. I taped on my wall the line, no grind, no glory, because I need to, the number of hours of grind as a percentage of the amount of time when people say great things. You got to put in so many more hours and so many weeks. You put out one and the broader community response is, And you just don't worry about it. Keep at it.
Keep moving.
Yeah. And sometimes you think it's the best one you ever did and it gets a meh. Other times, I mean, there was one where I quit after about 12 hours. I just could not put it together in a way that I found was the quality that I wanted it to be to make the points that I wanted. I remember I was telling Amy, like, we had dinner plans and it's 3:00. So I just went into this folder of just rando stuff. I ended up just picking 6 random charts. And I called it was a couple of weeks ago, and I called it things that make you go, huh?
Uh-huh. I
And
saw
it
it.
was like,
Yeah.
it was crazy popular. I got like all of these new subscribers,
Isn't
and it
that
was,
amazing?
yeah, it's just part of it is, do the right thing in the right way, have your, and know, trust kind of the process,
Mm.
but don't overthink it. It's
No,
the best thing you ever did. Maybe just doesn't get seen because it was random timing or bad luck, or, you know, it, you generally, what you're doing, and trust the process.
I like that so much, and I think that's good counsel for everything in life, right? Just keep going. Like, don't worry. It doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes the things that you don't think are going to hit are the ones that really do. You don't even realize they're going to resonate. I've got to ask you, Bruce. I have a 20-year-old. He is in college. He came home last summer. He said maybe I should go to trade school. I said, well, I'm in favor of that. I said, I think you should finish your degree because you're in and you like where you are. But the reason for his rationale for that thought was that AI is a threat for him, for jobs. So when you talk to young people at your firm, around town, in the world, because I know you do a lot of, you teach as well, what kinds of counsel do you give folks about AI as it relates to the next generation?
It is unbelievably scary and unbelievably empowering.
Mm,
I mean, a lot of the stories show some of the stories today. I think Axios led with this and a few others, but blue collar jobs aren't safe from AI.
mm,
Admittedly, the robots right now don't necessarily know how to do the plumbing or the welding. They will.
mm,
The idea that, well, they're going to be able to do creative and thinking tasks, but they won't be able to oversee stuff that is more what you'd learn in vocation techs is wrong. I I tend to me, the solution to that is learn more about AI, learn how to use AI. We had a firm lunch an hour ago or two, and at one point I asked the whole room, I said, raise your hand if you use AI at least once every day, raise if you use more than one LLM. We talked, I mean, everybody has had the same experience where sometimes you use it and it's like, this is simply wrong. Like, this
yeah,
gave me, if I sent this as a client, they should fire me, not only because I was lazy, but like my job is to give them right answers.
that's
And if
right.
I want to save myself time, saving time and giving them the wrong answer is double bad. They
That's
could
right.
use an LLM and get the wrong answer. They have me to have, lots of ways to get the right answer. But at the same time, you got to figure what else is out there. Other
Mhm.
things, I'm cautious about using it on my slide decks and my Substack because I don't want to put out bad information.
No.
But, I went to one and I just said, "Hey, find me the average published by the University of Michigan consumer confidence per year." That, that shouldn't, maybe it could hallucinate, but that's here is the link, here is the source. It just saved me cutting and pasting into a spreadsheet, and that saves a bunch of time. And you could have it go and, find me links that talk about blank, and for my research, it often saves me an hour of hunting. It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's got the end solution. So my advice to my own kids, three of whom I have three, and they're all in their 20s, is um, uh, people aren't going to be displaced such that we don't have jobs. It maybe will be more creative. It certainly will be more comfortable with AI, knowing how to use AI. I've got one who's a Hill staffer. If you can be the best person in the office at sort of prompt jockeying, at
Mhm.
knowing, oh, that, you know what, to do that, we ought to use Claude. To do that, that's a chat GPT. Gemini is going to get the best answer on this one. I- I'm in the early innings of figuring out, some seem to, Gemini gets some things better and chat GPT gets other things better. Uh, I think there's going to be a lot of room for people who are able to use, in the same way the internet didn't get rid of jobs. It enhanced all of our jobs, but it early on, and you're in my careers, who was good at leveraging the internet and all the things that were out there,
Right.
first to suck in and then to push out, and now even to push out.
Mhm.
I'm definitely not using all of the tools that are available on Substack, to say nothing of other ways. I mean, I don't want to be an influencer per se, but as you know, if you're going to write the damn stuff, I sure want readers. I'm hoping everybody listening to this is going to sign up.
Well, that's a good segue. Bruce, tell me, how can folks find you? Age of Disruption is the name of your Substack. Where can they find you? How can they follow? All of those good things.
Well, Google's still pretty good. If you Google Bruce, Mehlman, and you say the word Substack, that'll instantly put you there. You can also find me on LinkedIn, where I take the approach of pretty much I'll link in with anybody. Try to keep Instagram a little bit narrower because that's where you put up family and dog pics. But I'm on Twitter, although it seems that that's lonelier than it used to be and a little edgier than it used to be, which is a bummer that X is not what used to be a really fascinating place to be. Feels like Substack to me is the most interesting platform out there right now for me. Admittedly, I love Instagram, but Instagram, it's too good. Like I'll often, instead of watching TV, if I'm on a business trip in the hotel, I'll go on Instagram and then it's like, oh, wow, I just went 2 hours and, better than scrolling through TV, but like I'm Michael Jordan highlight reels and, dogs that are well-behaved and badly behaved. And it knows me to a dangerous extent.
Well, I'll make sure in the link for this show, I'll make sure that it is also, because this podcast is on Substack and I share this content on Substack, I'll make sure folks that follow my show are following you, because the content that you put out every week, I think, is so incredibly thoughtful and important, and I appreciate it so much. Bruce, this was so fun. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Lisa.
Thanks for joining me. That was super fun. I'm looking forward to a really busy and exciting 2026. Big thanks to my production team at Two River Pictures. And another really important thanks to my friends at Be the Brand Collective, who helped me with marketing and making sure the word gets out about the show. I'll see you again for another episode. Thanks so much.